Four more members of the Sports Source family right over here, Jimmy Himes, and then VFL Mike Stoll, VFL Marlon Walls, VFL Will Overstreet. I appreciate all you guys being here. I went through the stats. Usually I just say, what are your top takeaways? I thought the top takeaway was so obvious, I'm getting mine out there first. Okay, here's my top takeaway. Carson Beck had all night to throw every time he dropped back, and he had receivers running wide open. Tennessee, with Nico, he didn't have receivers running wide open, and he sure as heck didn't have time to throw. And to me, that whole game was two things. They had receivers that you didn't, or at least they schemed their guys open and you didn't, and they had a pass rush and you didn't. That was it. We can talk about all the other things that played a role, but I go back to O-line versus D-line, and I go back to receivers versus DBs. They beat you on both, and I don't know how you win the game when the advantage was that clear and that strong in Georgia's favor. Top takeaway, Will Overstreet. What do you got?
Well, the first half was like a great prize fight. I mean, it was a back and forth. There were things you were winning on. There were things you were losing on. Second half, it looked like a Netflix prize fight, right? A lot of buffering and stuttering. Not a lot of clear there. So, I just looked at it as two tales of two halves. I mean, obviously there were weaknesses in the first half. They were showing up, but really what you saw, Mike Bobo took what Kentucky and Mississippi State put on tape. A lot of motions, a lot of formations, a lot of different things, and saw how our linebackers and some of our safeties and people did not adjust well. And they ran that and got guys open and found ways to win that way. And that was a big part of this game.
Who's next? You can go.
I'll go ahead. Yeah, most definitely. Like you can see today, they had a game plan. Georgia had a game plan. They were going to challenge us on the outside. They went at our best defensive back constantly. I think 2 plays in a row one time, and that made it super obvious that that was their game plan. My top takeaway is we got outcoached. We got outcoached, and it seemed like we always get outcoached versus Georgia. Reason being, right, like we talked about, their receivers are running wide open. We saw none of that on our side. With a young quarterback, and again, I got to go back to Josh Heupel was an offensive mind. So when I hear that, I think I'm going to see different formations. I'm going to see different shifts. I'm going to see different alignments, things that make the defense kind of freak out a little bit and make Kirby Smart and them have to make adjustments, and I did not see that. I go back real quick. A couple years ago, we played against LSU at LSU, and they had to play where they had Jalen Hyde kind of squatting down in the backfield. He runs out on a wheel route, catches a touchdown. I'm expecting that kind of play calling, that kind of shuffling when we're playing against Georgia, who has a really good defensive back. Defensive side, they're going to be good, and we have an offensive-minded coach. I did not see that last night.
I saw one time they did it with the Kitzelman dive play. That was it. That was your first drive, and I didn't see much else. Now, maybe they weren't executing. Maybe if you execute differently, we were sitting there saying, oh, that worked, but I didn't see a lot of creativity, especially compared to Mike Bobo, an offensive coordinator who usually takes a beating. Yeah. And I thought he gave you the beating last night. Jimmy, Mike,
so among my keys, get off to fast start for Tennessee. Dylan Sampson run for 100 yards and convert on third down, 55%. But there was something else that overwhelmed the whole thing, and that was the fact that Carson Beck went from zero to hero from Ole Miss to Tennessee, and Tennessee put no pressure on him the whole night. He got comfortable. And the other thing, and it goes back to coaching, their tight ends caught 11 passes for over 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I didn't see adjustments to take that away. Why not? So kind of, Marlon, to your point, I think a lot of it was coaching and getting out schemed basically on both sides of the ball.
I look at it this week, and I always thought, what offensive line is going to play better? Georgia's offensive line against Ole Miss was awful. Tennessee's offensive line over the last couple of weeks has played better. Yeah. But then you go and you see how they played, and Beck had all the time in the pocket. Nico was pressured. Now, he was pressured with linebackers and twists and stunts that we did not pick up interiorly. Our offensive tackles did okay. They held their own. There wasn't some guy getting beat on the inside. On the inside. I saw Spragan just standing there and flashes by him, and he did not pick up the blitzes. So that's coaching on understanding that, and it's also coaching in the fact that we thought we could rush 4 and get to him, and we didn't, and we never made any adjustments to try and put pressure on. So we lost up front, and that's what it boils down to, but we lost up front because our coaches didn't put ourselves in position to have the schemes and the twists and the different things that we could pick up or we could run at Georgia.
Along those lines, I thought one of the biggest advantages for Tennessee going into that game was Tennessee's defensive line against Georgia's offensive line, which did not play well.
Struggled
against Ole
all
Miss.
year.
And it was the opposite. Tennessee's defensive line did not show up. They did not have a good game, and Georgia did a nice job against them.
Pierce got a couple of offsides.
Right. Hey, to that point, Jimmy, James Pierce Jr. is really good when we're moving him around. That's when he's made his best plays. He made a play last night where we kind of stunned him inside. He made a good play. Yeah. Why did we not do more of that? Like, for me, that's a lot of coaching. The players don't call that. I don't think this group had the authority to say, hey, we're going to run a twist on our T.
Right.
Like, that is coaching. And so I did not see that, and so that confused me. We're not getting there just going straight pass rush.
I thought, I will say this, I'll give Pierce credit. I thought he had the best pass rush. He could have had 3 sacks. He just couldn't get back on the ground, which is the big problem. The part you didn't see is you normally have gotten a lot more pressure from the inside from Blott and those guys, and I thought they didn't have a good game at all.
You've gotten a lot of pressure this year without getting sacks.
Yeah.
Do you say, nah, good enough, you're getting a lot of pressure? Or do you say, you're not getting home? Where are you, pass rusher?
You
want the sack,
You obviously want the sack, right? Yeah. If you're hitting the guy and getting him on the ground, that's different than sometimes they're counting pressures as you kind of buzz the guy. Mm-hmm. But you got to get hits. Like, if you're not getting sacks, hits are still the body blow that you want on the quarterback that causes the same issue. It may not get your down and distance, but at least it speeds up the quarterback's clock and gets him nervous, and that's really what you're trying to do.
Got to affect him.
Yeah, you got to affect him. They were not hitting him
at all.
They weren't hitting him.
Yeah. And that's one we can talk about a little later, I'm sure. But we said it last week. Ole Miss did you no favors. I mean, everything that they exposed, Georgia looked like, okay, we're not going to let that happen again. Yeah. And Delp, who went nuts last night, one of the tight ends, he didn't have a catch against Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Not a single catch. Now, might have been banged up this year, but he did play against Ole Miss. So if he was hurt last week, he sure got healthy in the last 5 or 6 days. Georgia last night, they mentioned this on the broadcast, 7 pass plays of 20 or more yards, you had 0.
0.
And you keep going back, and I know we've talked about it. It's like it's 50-50. This offense needs the run game. This offense needs big plays. If you've only got one of those,
no,
it's not great.
Here's what I would say. Like, if you look at our offense this year, we have not wowed people. We have not gone in and threw for this amount of yards, and we're putting 40 points on the board. So that's the reason why, even more so for me, when I watched that game last night, it falls on coaching, because we should know at this point in the season what we can and cannot do offensively. And I would think from an offensive mind, I've got to do something to stress that defense out and make them have to say, hey, we have to adjust to this. And I don't understand why I did not see that yesterday.
Now, I will say this, and you may disagree with me, which is perfectly fine. I do think the coaching was an issue last night. I thought you got thoroughly outcoached. I will also say, if you go back a week, Kirby Smart got thoroughly outcoached by Lane Kiffin.
Sure.
So for those who are hearing that and saying, yeah, our coaches suck, I don't know that I would go there. I think it's you sucked last night.
You had a bad night at the office.
You may disagree,
sure did.
but I think it's legit to rip them. I just know that people hear that and they go, "Oh yeah, our staff sucks." It's like I don't think they suck. I think they sucked last night.
Yeah.
Well, I think the other thing is like Jimmy's and Joe's eventually, right? Like what this offense is missing is, besides Dylan Sampson, who's your big play person, right? I don't care what the wide receivers came in with, how good they looked at spring practice or summer practice. Yeah. You don't have any playmakers, big playmakers at wide receiver. Period. End of sentence.
Well, I thought of that about Georgia going into this game. Yeah. Who were their big play guys?
Yeah.
Oops.
They got him open.
Tight ends.
Yeah, I mean, Thornton's a guy that averages a crap ton of yards per catch, but the problem is he doesn't get that many catches. It's not, 25 yards a catch, but 2 catches a game.
How many drops?
One
You
game.
can look like Tarzan and play like Jane.
Yeah,
but
he's been better with the drops than some of those guys.
I bet you that's the scouting
night.
report of our wide receivers, to be honest with you, from other defenses. They look like Tarzan and they play like Jane.
I agree 100%. That just, hey, know that they're probably, I'll take a 50-50 ball if I'm on defense.
And I'll
because
say,
they're not going to, if it's 50-50, it's probably going to be more like 25-75.
I'll say this too. I told Bob last night. The next time somebody goes nuts about some transfer in at wide receiver who's going to be all world, I don't care if it's Justin Jefferson transferring in from the Vikings. He's not going to be good here his first year. So Dante Thornton's a little better this year than he was last year, but he was a disappointment last year. Chris Brazzell, disappointment. It is what it is. So the next year when we're like, oh, did you see this great transfer we got? Yeah, I did. I'll believe it when I see it on the field. Okay. Bitterness today, but fun bitterness. All right. When we come back, the best player, worst decision, and biggest disappointment of the night. We've got a lot more to cover. Come on back.